Okay, we're live.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us virtually for History Miami Museum's 4th annual CultureFest 305, a folk life festival celebrating what makes Miami, Miami. My name is Vanessa Navarro-Maza, and I'm the folk life curator at the History Miami Museum, and I manage the South Florida Folk Life Center, which is the division that's dedicated to documenting, presenting, and supporting our region's traditional arts and cultural heritage. So over the weekend, you can enjoy online performances, workshops, and demonstrations with some of the city's finest traditional artists, dancers, and musicians. And you could join us tomorrow for a full day of programming, including live storytelling, a Japanese origami and calligraphy workshop, a performance of Sephardic music and Latin American folk songs, and we're closing it out with a virtual dance party with Haitian compa band Gabel. Be sure to check out the festival schedule on our webpage at historymiami.org, which also includes ongoing activities for kids and adults. And this includes craft activities, artist videos, cooking recipes, and much more. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors at the National Endowment for the Arts and the Perez Crearte Grants Program for making CultureFest 305 possible. And I'd like to give a big thank you to our partners at O Cinema for hosting today's special screening of Deep City, The Birth of the Miami Sound. And I'd also like to thank the filmmakers, Marlon Johnson and Chad Tingle, for joining us. We're delighted to be able to include this important piece of our history as a part of CultureFest 305 and highlight how Florida's first Black-owned record label contributed to our music scene and music culture here in Miami. And now I will hand it off to Matt at O Cinema.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And thank you so much for letting O Cinema be a part of this. It's a very cool festival you guys have put together, and we're very thrilled to be a part of it here. So want to get right into this here and discuss with Chad here and Marlon about Deep City. So guys, this was such a great film to match with the heart of what the festival is all about. What makes Miami, Miami. So I'm curious, how did you guys sort of come to the story?
First of all, thank you for having us. We actually have a third directing partner by the name of Dennis Scholl. We had all done a film together for the first time through the Knight Foundation. And that was a short, and he had received some information through one of his friends about this wealth of music, basically, that no one knew of, that was from Miami. And I'm from Miami, Dennis is from Miami, Chad has been in for forever. And he wanted us to take a look and see if there was something there. We didn't know any of the art. I mean, we knew Betty Wright, but we didn't know any of the other key players, and we didn't know about Deep City. And so we really had to go on this kind of hunt and adventure to find out who these characters were and kind of gain trust that we would be able to put the story together. And one thing led to another. And, we fell in love with the music, as you know, as you can hear from the soundtrack. So it was really something special that we're so proud that we were able to do.
Okay, and how about you, Chad? What brought you to the story?
So, I think the first time when we finished the other film that we had done with Dennis, he handed us the album. And he said, go take a listen to this. So the album that we feature in the film from Numero Records, the Eccentric Soul album. And I remember the first song I heard was one of the Helene Smith songs. And in my head, I'm thinking, this is like Diana Ross. It sounded like a Diana Ross. And I was like, how is this possible that none of us know anything about this? And that was sort of like, it was because I think, when you're doing films like this, the first thing is, are you going to connect with the music? If you don't connect with the music, then you can't tell the stories. So, I remember listening to that album for days, just trying to in my head, picture how are we going to tell the story? And then also not having any material, you could find specks of things on the internet here and there, the real hardcore collectors who you could find a YouTube page, or you could hear one of the songs, or you could find some website with a low resolution picture of Helene or Clarence from the 1960s. So it was sort of really kind of going on this archive dig to unearth and also then find a vehicle to tell the story.
And the archiving of it, I mean, you guys found so much footage and really good footage too, really good archive footage as well. And so talk a little bit about what that experience was like and the difficulties that you guys encountered with finding some of this rare stuff, rare footage, rare music.
So the good thing is on a lot of the local footage that you see is a wonderful resource here, and I have to give them credit. It's the Lynn and Lewis Wilson Archive, and Llewellyn Kermer, who's the main archivist there. That was a huge resource, which I knew from like another life. So I knew a lot of this stuff existed. The old Channel 6 WTVJ station, once they moved from film to video, donated all their newsreels. So we knew that we could find, footage. We could find black and white footage of South Florida. What we didn't really count on was the stuff in color, which were Super 8 Kodak films that families had donated. So there were these two large family collections of Super 8 films that were donated. So when we stumbled upon that, that was sort of like another aha moment, because usually when you see Black people in the 60s, it's black and white, it's dogs, it's fire hoses. There's a certain criteria under which you normally see that footage. You'll find other stuff that shows happy moments. And, even though at the time South Florida is segregated and these people are living in their own pocket, they still carved out this life for themselves. And so it was really good to sort of use that imagery in a positive light. I think that was one of the things that we really tried to establish in the film, is to kind of show these two worlds that were polar opposites, but in both senses, in both places, people were trying to, regardless of the larger political issues in our society, people were carving out their own lives. And then the Soul Train stuff was another kind of a dig, because we kept looking on YouTube and you'd find some Betty Wright stuff. And then I found the Little Beaver stuff. And then we'd have to find out who owns that footage now, because Soul Train had licensed it off to somebody else. So it's like found a hardcore collector thing where like someone had done this thing that listed every single Soul Train episode and every single performer that was on it. And I was able to download like this massive PDF, figure out kind of like in our heads, like what year it was, and then kind of go, okay, here's a Betty Wright episode, here's a Betty Wright episode, and then go to the new people who own the footage and say, okay, this episode has Betty Wright. Can you send us samples that we can see? And this episode has Little Beaver. Can you send us those samples? So it was really kind of like this like reverse engineering process. But somehow we got lucky. We got lucky with like the Dick Clarke footage as well. Same thing, American Bandstand. We got really lucky, and that Willie remembered that story of Betty Wright coming into the record shop, so we could intercut the two stories so that they would match up. And I thought that was one of the things that we had to find ways to add validity to their story. And the archive really helped us do that.
Yeah, without a doubt, some amazing archival footage, and really clear and really good-looking footage too. So commend you guys on that. And speaking of that archival footage, what I happen to notice, and we briefly discussed this before we jumped on the meeting here, that we're all pretty much Miami natives. And, one of the things, I mean, I'm a younger guy myself. I'm 35, but so I didn't
have to show off, Matt. You don't have to.
So I wasn't quite around during some of the more tumultuous times in Miami's history. But one of the things that I picked up on, and I really kind of liked a lot about your documentary, was Overtown and how it was featured in the documentary, and about you guys had such good footage of that time period. I'm just wondering, could you guys talk a little bit about that and sort of the importance of it into the film and why it was important to include it as prominently as you did?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to a little bit of to piggyback on what Chad was saying, is that so often these types of neighborhoods, especially when you mentioned Overtown or even Liberty City, are really framed in a particular way that is not often accurate. And so what we tried to do is show that there was this vibrant, proud community of people that existed, and that their lives and the beauty of their surroundings was real and was palpable. You know, we think of this time and we think of, you know, them performing on South Beach, but when they came over the bridge to Overtown, like it says in the film, they were home and they got down. And not a lot of people know that. And there's a real, you know, this dichotomy between, you know, kind of mainstream America and then this beautiful Black Americana existence that resonated with so many folks who saw the film. So.
And if I could piggyback off that, I mean, you think of a guy like Muhammad Ali, who's a central figure in our culture at that time. He would train at Fifth Street on South Beach, but he couldn't stay there. So he actually lived in Overtown, training for the Liston fight. You know what I mean? And it's also a pivotal time in his life because it's right after that fight that he changes his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. So, you know, that all happens within that time period.
Right. And, you know, I think that so much of the time when people think of the history of Miami, particularly when it comes to music, it kind of starts in the 70s, you know, or rather that's like the benchmark for when they think music started in Miami. And your documentary clearly shows that is just not true.
Back it up.
Right. You got to back it up. Right. And so I'm wondering what kind of reactions were you guys getting from not just laymen, but, you know, music aficionados, music guys who were just sort of like, wow, I didn't even know that. What kind of reactions were you getting from that back when you guys started traveling around the festival circuit?
Chad,
or was there? Was there none?
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of different reactions. I think, you know, when we got into South by Southwest, that was a big thing, is because, you know, they'd never heard of this music scene before, and, you know, you're talking about these people who are kind of like music nerds who know every little pocket of music. So that was interesting. That was from musicians, you know, and even musicians here in Miami who are full-fledged musicians trained in jazz or classical or probably lived here their whole life. And I've showed them the film and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea this. You know, they knew of Clarence Reid, they knew of Blowfly, but they didn't know the genesis. And so I think if you think of the Miami sound has changed over the years in so many ways. You have that version, which is why we call it the birth, but then you go into the 70s and you have the Betty Wrights, and then that goes into disco with the KCs and the Gwen McRae's and you know, and then you also go into the 80s with Luke, and you go into Miami bass, and then you go to Trick and Trina. But if you listen to all those different sounds, they're all drawing back to that original sound.
What's funny about the chat is when we were at South by Southwest, a lot of times when people just saw like the poster or the title, they always thought, oh, Miami sound, oh, Miami bass. Oh, great, I can't wait to see more about this. And we were like, no, it's a little bit older than that.
Yeah. So you can hear the influences in all of the different, and even now, if you listen to some of the music that's being produced locally, that's getting attention, you can feel the narrative thread in all of it that goes back to like the marching band sound and the loud horns and kind of like, you know, even the way the drum beat is, it's like literally a step behind. So, you know, it's what was fascinating to us, I think too, was we are so used to music in our lives now in terms of how ubiquitous it is, where if somebody's from Louisiana or somebody's from Texas, because of Spotify or because, you know, national play, you can pick up on things. Back then, music was really regional. So, you know, the window of this music may have been Miami to West Palm Beach. And if you lived outside that and they didn't get distribution outside of that window, you could go decades and not hear this stuff. So that's the difference in the worlds we are now, which is, I think if this music was, you know, at the time had national exposure, if they were maybe like a decade later with their talents, this might have been a completely different story.
And the other thing was so great about the gem of this is that like being able as a storyteller to have something that not a lot of people know about and to be able to expose it to the world, like Dennis, our creative partner, exposed it to us, and then the three of us exposing it to the world and not a lot of people knowing about it, is really gratifying as a storyteller, to be able to find, you know, to look under rocks and find things that aren't low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is the beauty of documentaries in general, and the good ones are the ones that generally find that thing that you think, what, I've never heard of that before. And you you just get that little spark of an interest, and then you get into it and you learn so much. I mean, I learned so much. I found myself, I hadn't seen the film when it was originally going around, but I did get a chance to rewatch it just recently, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I got to pop up in my Spotify here, because there are a couple of names here I need to start jotting down and getting into some playlists. So I mean,
yeah, if you do like Little Beaver Radio, you're set.
Okay,
You're
all right.
set. You're
Good,
set.
good.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, admittedly, I knew very little about Willie Clarke, beforehand. But I was reminded of an old episode of Anthony Bourdain's
Sure.
Parts Unknown. I take it you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we were approached by them at the time, and kind of helped facilitate putting some of that episode together. And it was wonderful that he, that was the beauty and the genius of Anthony, was he's always able to go into communities and really dig a little deeper and go right below the surface. And it was an honor to for his team to reach out to us and to highlight these folks.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think to myself that somebody on that team must have, somebody must have seen your guys short when it was making the rounds back then, because literally the next year is when that episode aired. And so I'm like, okay, this has to be related somehow. But that's awesome, and listen, that kind of exposure and what, History Miami Museum is doing with this festival and everything, kind of really showcasing Miami for what it is. It's multi-dimensional, multicolored, multiracial. I mean, we're a melting pot here. And sure. And I feel like that this documentary really kind of encapsulates that.
Yeah, I think, this has been a mantra of my both of us, I think, and Dennis as well, is that for so long, I don't know if, Miami culturally, artistically has been given its proper due, and us finding our voices is something that has taken place, and it's really refreshing to see, because I remember the void. I remember when everything was deferred to places that will remain nameless, but and so now we've come into our own as a city, and it's really a refreshing and exciting time to be here.
And I think too, to follow up on that, I think it's also about like telling Black Miami story. I think that often gets overshadowed. They were on the original charter for the city, so to be able to basically highlight that there is a vibrant culture here, and this is the last big stop. Before you hit the Keys, so Overtown and that whole scene that's an important part of the genesis of this city that I think gets overshadowed. There's remnants of it if you're willing to walk around Overtown and look at some of this history and read about it. It's pretty fascinating to think that this little sleepy beach town, that's not a very old city. We're not a New York, we're not a Chicago, we're not in LA. It's a pretty young city. So it has this really very rich history in a really compact amount of time. And I think that's why, hopefully down the line, grandkids and things like that, people will see it differently. But I think people pass it over because of the fun and sun and the fact that it's not a 200 or 300, 200-year-old city that has like these roots. But I think the history here is just as vibrant. I mean, I think it's part of the reason I stayed here. I'm not from here, but I've been here most of my life, So it's there are things here that keep me interested. I learn something new every day.
Yeah, it's like the great philosopher and poet Andre 3000 said, "The South's got something to say."
There you go. There you go. Hey, speaking of learning things, and discovering things through your documentary and whatnot, what was like the one thing that I would say that you guys learned through this process that surprised you the most, or the one thing that kind of has stuck with you in your head the most from the experience of making this doc?
For me, I would say the caliber of music. I think if you just took these group of people and stuck them in Detroit or stuck them in Philly, Nashville, New York, that they would be on a national level of any of the greats that we all know. And I sincerely mean that. And I think that's a little bit of a metaphor for Miami in general.
There you go. And what about you, Chad? Anything that you were able to learn along the way?
I would echo that for sure. But I think the one memory I take away from this whole experience in general, I remember we were at South by Southwest, and there was a second screening after the premiere, and we were trying to decide if we were going to stick around. And I said, you know what, one of us, Marlon had to get back for some family stuff. And I said, you know what, I'm going to stick around and go to the second screening and catch a later flight. And I went to the screening. It was a smaller screening at the Alamo Draft House. And at the end of it, this old, if I may say, maybe 70-year-old white lady came up to me. And she said, you know, I just want to thank you. She goes, and I could see the lights turning over in her eyes, that I brought her back. We had brought her back to this place that she hadn't thought of in years. She grew up in Miami and she moved away, and she said, my boyfriend used to take me to those nightclubs, when I was young, when I was in my 20s. And she was like, she's like, you brought me back to such an amazing time in my life that I haven't thought about in such a long time. And I could tell that in a way it was sort of like people are in the twilight of their lives and they start looking back. And and that's the one thing that stuck with me. I'll always remember that moment, no matter, wherever the film goes or wherever it lands. The fact that I was able to impact one person like that with this story, I'll remember that forever. I'll always remember that. And she was so genteel and sweet. She shook my hand and, almost started tearing up. It was, that I'll always remember.
That's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. And, Miami is such a changing city. It's always developing, and we're always, building new condos and new things and tearing old things down to replace them with something new. And so films like this and the archival stuff and everything kind of that is able to capture that era of Miami. It really is important for people. It really is. And being able to transport themselves, get nostalgic and go back to that time. The music is really good at transporting people that way, but being able to visually see it and remember it and say, oh, wow, I used to go there. That matters a lot, I think.
And I would say, our approach was really, to be honest, as we sat down and as we were, we went through a lot of drafts between myself, Marlon, Dennis, trying to really kind of find the right rhythm. And I think where we really kind of struck it is when we decided to kind of make the music, the soundtrack to this period, good and bad. We were able to find the right songs to be able to evoke the right emotions at the different points in the film. So, some of the songs that we used weren't necessarily some of the most popular songs that people may listen to on the album, but they were the ones that, struck the right tone. And I thought that was something that we worked really, really hard at. I mean, we went through a lot of edits. Like Marlon and I, we actually edited out of my house in a small room, and we spent a lot of time just trying to finesse that, and then have Dennis listen to it and say, no, maybe we have to do this, or maybe we have to do this, and playing with the sequencing, but I think in the end, I think we got it right.
It's awesome. Yeah. And so let me ask you guys this, because I know we're coming around to the end here. I'm curious, if you guys could have one key takeaway that you would hope the audience walks away with after watching this film, what would that be?
I think just the transformative nature of music and its ability to both tell history, to put you in a sense of place and time that so few art forms can do, and we should all celebrate and appreciate it.
Here.
I would say in today's culture, things become throwaway very easily. I think we do that here in America a lot. We kind of go through a period where we really love something and then we kind of forget the roots of it and we throw it away. We're lucky the British always bring it back to us. I think it's the same thing with the blues and rock, you know, with the British invasion. And I would say the same thing with this period. You know, this stuff disappeared in the 70s and ended up in Manchester. And then all of a sudden in the 2000s, you know, and also through sampling and hip hop and, you know, artists discovering this music. But I would say it's, you know, it's just remember to treasure the things that you have when you have them. You know what I mean? Because I think if you don't, then I think in the long run, you end up, you know, you can look back and really miss things. So I think it's about, you know, educating people on what we have and why the city's so special and the things here that we can pass on to other generations. I think is the, you know, the most important lesson I would try to impart on the audience.
Got you. Okay, well said, guys. Listen, we've taken up enough of your time. Thank you guys so much for participating in this.
If I can say one thing, Matt, before you.
Yeah, please.
We do have a follow-up to Deep City that's going to be coming out
cool.
about Helene Smith. So it's a short. So, you know, just telling everybody to stay tuned for that. Probably maybe sometime next year, right, Johnson?
Yep. It'll premiere in the spring of 2020.
So okay. And anything else you guys are working on? You want to put a quick plug out for?
We have a couple things in development, but we can't explicitly talk about just yet. But
Dennis and I are kind of collaborating on something that's still kind of rough. So that's something, you know, hopefully we'll know a little bit more about next year. COVID kind of, you know, slowed us down, but hopefully we can get cranking a little bit on that too.
Right on. Well, we'll be definitely looking forward to it, guys. Thank you again so much for participating in this. And everybody out there who's watching, please remember that History of Miami Museum's CultureFest 305 is going to be continuing into tomorrow with more programming. I don't know, Vanessa, you're still here. Would you like to jump in and give people a little preview of what to look forward to tomorrow?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first, I want to thank the three of you, and thank you for letting me have a front row seat to this conversation. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Vanessa, before you finish, I have to run. I'm sorry, something has come up, but thank you guys so much.
Thank you,
Chad, Matt, and everyone. Sorry, Dennis couldn't be here.
No. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys.
Yeah, so you can check out the schedule of activities that are happening tomorrow on our website, historymiami.org/culturefest305 2020. And we have, like I mentioned, we have performances, workshops, live storytelling for kids. And then there's a ton of stuff on the webpage that people can also check out. So I would just encourage people to just, you know, explore the webpage, see what is interesting to them. For these programs, if they're interested in chatting with us and in maybe asking questions of the artists that are featured, definitely join us on Zoom. If not, they can just join on Facebook Live.
Sounds perfect. Okay, thank you, Vanessa, and thank you again, guys. And
thanks, man. Appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care, man.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Vanessa.
Bye.